I described last video about having gone to a majority white Christian school, but I forgot to mention that I only attended there from pre-K up through 6th grade, and starting in 7th grade I attended public school. And again, I mentioned that I grew up in northern Delaware in the Wilmington area. That's where Joe Biden lives, his house. And so from 7th grade, I started attending public school. And so, whereas the private Christian school I went to, I had always been, for most years, the only Asian student in class, whereas where I went to for middle school, it's actually very close to where we were living at the time, and that area, I think, may have the largest percentage of Asian people in Delaware, I believe. But like even that, it wasn't very much. I think like it was like maybe 4%. I don't know, it was like 4 to 6% maybe. That's Asian in that town, or it's really a census designated place. Not doesn't have a municipal government. It's run by county government. But so I went to middle school with a bunch of the kids that went to the Korean church with me, and then there was quite a few Chinese students. So I was surrounded by more Asian representation, and also I was starting in middle school, so I think I turned 7th grade year. I turned 13, and so I guess that's around the time you really start to form your identity. And I described before where I never really could per se feel ashamed of being Asian or Korean, but at the same time did not want to feel like an outsider or that I didn't belong or was different. But I would say like closer to that time, like age 13, I think I was becoming more comfortable with owning up to kind of full on identifying as Korean, Asian American, being proud of it. And also around that time, I became familiarized with the term in the Asian American community that somebody who's Asian but acts or behaves white, they're called Twinkie, because you're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. And for me personally, I thought being identified as Twinkie is negative and kind of shameful, and particularly being identified as feeling like or wanting to be white. I thought that's something that I did not look positively on. But like I guess at the same time, like trying to find your identity. So like what is it to be Asian American? So we're talking about acting white or acting black, but what is acting Asian? So like what? So it's kind of like being such a small minority, we don't know like what does it mean to be or act Asian. And so I don't know. So it's kind of like, so of course nobody's a monolith, but then that's like the time of your life when you're really trying to form your identity. And around that time, I had been really into basketball and really started listening heavily into rap or hip hop music at the time. So and like a lot of my peers were wearing the 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 baggy jeans. So this was around this yeah this was 1998. So at that time, that was kind of the the styles. I guess not among everybody, but if you were into hip hop, like it was the baggy clothes era. Um, so so I remember I did like at some point around the time did get myself like a baggy clothes, um, but like that wasn't all I wore, and I was like being that I grew up being so self conscious about sticking out, or like I didn't want to stick out and didn't want to feel um, uh, like an outsider or um, to be looked upon as weird. So it was important for me to not really stand out. So I don't think I primarily dressed that way, or I think I had an appreciation, I guess, for that style, but I didn't want to give the impression that I'm being something I'm not, or like really standing out too much. So it wasn't everything I wore, but I did own some really baggy jeans and large t-shirts. So I had like a few of those, but that's not all I wore. So I don't know if it has anything to do with where I grew up, but apparently I didn't know this growing up, but Delaware is among the states with the largest percentage of the population that is African American. I think the state of Delaware is like um, over 20% African American, and the city of Wilmington, which is the main city, or this largest city in Delaware, and also like the central city of where I lived. And the city itself was half African American. So, and Delaware was like even in the during that time into the late '90s and into the 2000s. They didn't have any high schools in the city of Wilmington, and they were still kind of doing busing there at the time. So part of the year, part of like during, I'm not exactly sure how, because I only started going to public school starting in seventh grade. But from my understanding, there's part of the years, there's the kids from the suburbs go into the city, and part of the years, or sometime like for us during elementary, middle, whenever they have the city kids go into the suburbs, so the middle school and the high school I went to had both suburban and uh, city kids from the city. The kids from the suburbs were mostly white, and the kids from the city were majority African American. Uh, quite a bit of Puerto Rican kids, Latino, uh, and even like a few white kids from the like city, like from the like those inner city neighborhoods. It was a mixture of suburban and urban, um, inner city in middle school and high school. So that was uh, really my first time in seventh grade really being exposed to or being around uh, kids from the city like that, because that's not what my experience was going to private school. And So, like I said, I started getting into basketball. I remember during lunch, after lunch, they gave us a bit of time to go outside, and they had this area like it's kind of like a divot or large. It was like a semi-outdoor basketball court where it was like kind of built in, um, so we're, like you had the overhang or the kind of overhang above you, but it was exposed on one side to the outside. So the court, basketball court itself, was like underneath like a roof overhang thing, and there was brick uh, on one side and on the end of the basketball court. So they used to play um, like a free for all. They could just call it free, kind of like 21, but I don't know if they were playing up to a certain number, but it was basically the rules of 21 here played 21, so like a person for yourself basketball. So I would play, and most of the kids that played were black kids from the city. Um, so um, so I don't know if I was ever um, I've always had kind of a hard time making friends in general, but like I had acquaintances of kids from the suburbs and kids from the city. Um, so um, I guess that was a part of forming my identity, and I also developed kind of a affinity for um, uh, hip hop culture, kind of, or at least an appreciation for it. Uh, so, um, that may have something to do with where I grew up, and it was similar once I got into high school. It was still a mixture of suburban kids and kids from the city. Um, but my high school was actually very close, approximately no more than 2 miles away from where Joe Biden lives. It was in a very wealthy area, so I'm sure some of the kids that attended may have been wealthy, but it was also a mixture of working class uh, kids as well. So there was wealthy and working class kids that I went to high school with. And again, the high school I went to probably had among the highest percentage of Asian kids as well. And so by this point, I think I was kind of all in with the idea of uh, identifying as being Asian or Korean, and being uh, proud of it. Um, but like again, I didn't know what uh, like Asian identity really meant, or like how that's presented. But yeah, so that's my completion, or kind of rounding out my description of being Asian in the United States, or particularly growing up where I grew up in northern Delaware.